So I'll start this from the top. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ihsan Hines from MBKCares. Welcome to another episode of MBKCares Wellness Wednesday. Tonight, we're going to be discussing mental health, and we're excited about our guest. Eric Marsh and I are joined today by two members of the Black Men Hill family. We have Douglas Reed, and we also have Reginald Howard here to join the discussion. And we're excited about talking about mental health, particularly dealing with the Black community. So Eric Marsh, he's one of the executive board members of MBKCares, and he's also the founder of the Father Circle. He'll be the co-host tonight to moderate this discussion. Eric, would you like to take it from here?
Absolutely, Ihsan. Thank you so much. And thank you everybody that's out there watching on Facebook and on YouTube and following this really important discussion around Black men's mental health and well-being. As Ihsan said, my name is Eric Marsh. I am also a board member of MBKCares, along with co-host of Wellness Wednesday with my brother Ihsan and co-founder of the Father Circle. And tonight we're going to be talking to Doug and Reggie from Black Men Heal about Black men's wellness, mental health, and how we can stay safe and stay healed for ourselves and our families and communities. And so I just want to say to Doug and Reggie, thank y'all for being here. Feel free to introduce yourselves. I want to start with Doug. Introduce yourself and tell us your role with Black Men Heal.
Well, my name is Doug Reed. I am the program coordinator for Black Men Heal. Mainly consists of King's Corner, the programming for that. I am also retired out of Federal Bureau of Prisons as a staff member, also retired in the United States Army Reserve. So I am a mental advocate. I believe in advocacy around mental health. And I just look forward to this conversation with you guys and appreciate what you guys are doing.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you and on all that you're doing as well. And now, Reggie Howard from Black Men Heal. Introduce yourselves and tell us what you do with Black Men Heal.
Yes, sir. I am the community. Again, my name is Reggie Howard, and I'm the community outreach coordinator at Black Men Hill. Having conversations like that, reaching out and making connections with the Father Circle and with MBK Cares is primarily my job description. But y'all both know with any organization, you probably do more than what your title says. So just trying to be that, Swiss Army knife and try to do anything to help get this mission and movement out there to the community.
Well, we appreciate you showing up with all your gadgets and all your attachments as your Swiss Army knife, because when it comes to Black men's wellness and particularly mental and emotional wellness, we need all the tools in the toolbox. So and that's another reason why, I really appreciate my brother Ihsan for recommending that you guys come on as a guests again, particularly because of, we're in May. And May is Mental Health Awareness Month. We also are dealing with a lot of different issues. Over the past couple of weeks, we've covered a variety of topics. But one of the things I think that brings us here is, and for me personally, is the stigma that's in our communities around this idea of people struggling with mental health or emotional health issues or concerns. And so I guess the first question that I have is, how can we get men specifically, and I'll actually expand it to men and boys, but how can we get men and boys in our communities, Black and brown communities, to not feel ashamed and embarrassed about seeking out mental health services and counseling? What are some of the ways that we could kind of destigmatize the need for mental health counseling and awareness? And I'll start with Reggie.
For me, I think it's actually having conversations like this, like me seeing Eric being vulnerable, me seeing Ihsan being vulnerable, me seeing Doug being vulnerable. It allows me the space to say, yo, that guy look like me. Like I can feel what he feels, like I can identify with it. I think a lot of the times, and my dad wasn't in my life, or he was in and out since I was 2 years old. You had those movies where the dad would go in the room after a long day of work and not say nothing. Who knows what he was going through emotionally, what was going on or what was happening, or who cared at that point. It's like, all right, you did your job, you did what you were supposed to do. How you felt emotionally don't matter. So having these conversations like this, I think it always happens to spark that idea within somebody. And then the other end of it, you said young men. I think again, and Eric, I think I heard you say it with fathers before, is like young men just need the space. Like they willing to talk to you if you willing to, have that conversation with them. And so I know a lot of young men, just because they know what I do with Black Men Hill, or what conversations we have, and they come up and talk to me about this and have it just openly. And it's like, well, why they can't talk? They do if this space is provided for them. And so I'm definitely a big component of the modeling. Like, all right, you be what you want to see. And this is the oldest thing in the book about like you being that. But I think it's so true. Like we see the athletes, we see the rappers, so we want to become. And if you see a mentally, a person being emotionally available, then you become emotionally available. So that's all I think it is. It's a lot more modeling, a lot more having conversations like this.
Excellent. Doug, what do you got to say about that?
Well, Red's kind of put it out, so I guess this is the new promo. Vulnerability is the new sexy. And that's just actually being able to express yourself, even emotionally, and not really worry about what is being said. But as Red said, talking about the communication, I think that's the first lines. When we start to communicate, especially within our communities, and we start to educate them, now we develop a system of trust, because now I'm able to see where you are and where you stand. And if I can trust you, then I'm more accessible, more vulnerable to actually let out what's actually bothering me, and it's not all held in. Now I have an opportunity to really express it. We can talk back and forth, and, may start off, with 5 minutes, then it's, I see you every week, or, now we start to develop a relationship. But, with men, one of the hardest things for us to do is to trust somebody else. But in order to trust somebody, you got to get to know them. Communication plays a vital role in that. And then you're able to actually remove that stigma around it, because now if I'm having issues or I'm having problems and we're expressing it in our communications, guess what? I found out I ain't the only one that's going through this process. Yeah. I don't have to, I ain't the only one that I thought, had the same problem. And the other thing is, I don't have to carry it on my shoulders. You know what I mean? So I think communication, I think trust, and the real biggie is being able for us as men to love one another.
Wow, that's big. Ihsan, I want to ask you a similar question, because you've been a huge advocate for therapy and mental health and mental well-being in a lot of different areas, but specifically as the founder of MBKCares. What are some ways that you were able to, one, personally overcome the stigma or embarrassment, if there was any, around seeking out therapy and counseling? And what do you recommend that other men do?
The struggle for me was realizing like faith wasn't in competition with therapy or any journeys. There was a lot of times I heard like, just pray about certain things, right? So then I didn't really realize like there's prayer in addition to the other types of work. One thing, and I'll challenge y'all to all talk about this too. I realized like a lot of the stigma didn't really exist. Like, I think it was like this veil, because the conversations, when we do have them, they are very open. When you bring people together, they tend to talk about things. So there's this idea, I think, that the stigma exists, but doesn't exist. I think it's just the absence of the conversation rather than opposition to people actually healing and being mentally well. But for me, it was other people, actually, the support system I had around me, because I gave up on therapy the first time I tried it. I couldn't really afford it. That was one thing. So I'm really blessed to have Black Men Hill here to talk about resources that are available financially and also just being present. But I couldn't afford my therapy. So what I learned, and I know I'm going on a tangent, but I saw that there was like systems where Black therapists didn't have the same opportunity to take insurance that was available through a lot of insurance carriers. So they had to charge their full rate or try to meet you at a place where it was affordable, but it still was way above a typical $30 copay. So I couldn't even afford therapy. So it was one, to find somewhere where I could afford, but then it was trying it again and realizing like the relationship of communication was so important, and me being consistent was going to be important. So I started seeing a change happen when I committed to it. And it took trying again and again and breaking all all conditions I thought had to be necessary. Now I know Black Men Heal is about connecting people with therapists and healing the Black man. My particular therapist is a white woman, and I always bring it up because I had an idea of what my therapist had to look like, but I just had to go find it working for me. I don't know if that completely answered your question, Eric, but that's what comes to mind when my own journey to healing comes up.
No, absolutely it does. And you actually brought up a good point that I want to transition to my next question. And I'm gonna pose this question to Doug because Ihsan talked about not being able to afford therapy, not being able to access therapy. Talk to us a little bit about the way that Black Men Heal provides services, and what's something that somebody can do if they don't have insurance that actually might cover the cost of a therapist or a counselor.
Yeah, well, what Black Men Healed actually does, and it evolves around the 8 free sessions of therapy. And what happens, even like 75% of our clients who actually go through it end up continuing on with their therapies, of course, paying or going through their insurance. One of the things that Black Men Heal does is they pair you up with a therapist of color, which means they tailor it. And it's a very unique, and Reg probably can actually expound on a little bit more. It's actually a very unique system that they pair you up like a matchmaking thing as far as your interests and everything. So that goes over and beyond. But once again, when we talk about therapy, just like anything else, we talk about our finances, we talk about different things like health as well. So you really got to make the investment into your therapy. You really got to take and go over and beyond as far as when you do see a therapy. Know what's going to be expected. Those hard questions are going to be, and we talked about their communications, those hard questions are going to be asked of you to be open with it. And that way we'll be able to match you up with a therapist of color. Now, there are other organizations that provide free therapy. And just recently, we just had a Instagram post with what's her name, Miranda Grande, the young lady.
Grande.
Yeah, she actually posted at least 10 organizations that provide free therapy, and that's what generally happens. So within our community, and that's part of the stigma because not being able to afford it. A lot of people within our community, a lot of people are working as well. Mm-hmm. But do we take the time out to really go to our jobs and it's usually human resources and our health benefits and ask for therapy. Now, of course, if you don't have insurance, and then you have to reach out to those other organizations, including ours, to see if you can actually, you can actually apply for it. And that's just going to the website and actually applying.
I wanted to piggyback too off of Eric because Doug summed that up beautifully. Some of the points that I was going to bring up. But I know we get this question a lot with like, how do you afford it? So I'm gonna give twofold answer because they both are on the spectrum. For one, we got to invest in in ourselves, and that's with anything. With health, we have to invest in ourselves for us to get the benefit out of it. So yes, it's costly, but it's worth it. It's just like a lawyer. The difference between them representing you and you representing yourself. Yeah, you can go in there and represent yourself, but paying someone that has the knowledge and has the tools that can support you, that works. Now on the other end of it, we understand that everyone don't have the resources to invest in themselves. And so the practical advice is, and speaking of lawyers, every therapist is almost like lawyers. You know how lawyers, they do pro bono work, and they do work for free on the back end in hopes of finding a way to financially work it out. So every therapist has and that's almost like how Black Men Heal was built as well. Every therapist has within their calendar of how they can offer free therapy. So you can call a private practice up and say, hey, I only have X amount of dollars. I want to pay for it, but I don't have your full rate. Can you work with me? And they usually, it's going to take some legwork, but they'll usually work with you based off of a sliding scale. So they all have sliding scales depending on the person. Now, if they're really busy, it's like, all right, well, you can't do it. But there's a mission and movement that's happening around Black people investing in mental health. A lot of people are making that exception because they want to make the the community better.
Mhm.
The other part of that, group therapy is cheaper than individual therapy. So you can always find group sessions for a cheap amount of price. Now you won't get that individual one-on-one, support, but you can still get that there. People say that with King's Corner all the time, that it's therapeutic. It may not be a therapy session, but it's therapeutic. So you can get those group sessions at a discounted rate as well. And that's how you can start the process of you getting in your therapy.
Well, you just brought it up, so let's roll right into to tell the people about King's Corner. What is King's Corner?
King's Corner.
Other than
That's
a dope shirt.
King's Corner was a concept that we came up with out of the pandemic. It was a need, honestly, where during the pandemic we had a surge in like people trying to apply for the free therapy. So going back to your question, is like, how do we service all of these men with a limited amount of therapists and a limited amount of providers? And it was like we can't physically do it, but we can create a safe space where every Sunday we can provide them with psychoeducation on different things within mental wellness. So we created King's Corner. It's every Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern, and we bring on, me and Doug co-facilitated. We bring in guest hosts to come in there and share their expertise. It's not always therapists, but there are a lot of therapists that come on as hosts, or also that be in the room to offer support as well. So we try to get that psychoeducation to help men heal and give them that space between that time of you getting the therapy or you just wanting to come to having that boost to start your week off.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, because I went through Black Men Heal and actually received the therapy. Then once we came up with this idea of this virtual free space, and you really got to get it like a virtual free space, because everybody is doing things virtually. And like Ray said, it's not therapy, but it's a group session. And what we find and going back to your original question about removing the stigma, about the communication, about the trust, is we're averaging like 25 guys each time we hold this. And now we've been doing it for over 50 weeks. Like we never anticipated this. I mean, it's went over and beyond, and we're getting guys that come into this space, based on the subject and the topic, and they're really expressing themselves. I mean, we have some real detailed and conversation where brothers are expressing himself. He's being transparent. I mean, we got guys from all around the country. I mean, we got guys calling in from the UK, but we never expressed that, and Taz always tells me and Red's like, yo, you guys are actually doing it, creating that space, but we're not doing anything but just allowing a brother to talk, to express himself. He's putting things in the chat. We're saying, okay, bro, we see it in the chat. Let's acknowledge what you said. And you already know the one thing a man wants is respect. And once he gets that respect, man, I talk my own journey. He's all in. Let's go.
Yeah. That's big. And I want to come back to this idea of respect and how it connects to some other things. But you just mentioned Taz. So I want to give credit where credit is due. Tell us a little bit about the founders of Black Men Heal and what you can share a little bit about those.
Well, I'll throw the pass and I'll let Reg catch it. Here you had a young lady that was in the mental health, therapy, as far as working in the field. And just like anything else, what we're discovering is the disparities. So now you're talking about, whether black therapists, and even Ihsan said it earlier, trying to find a therapist of color was always a major issue. What she did was she recognized that there were some disparities. She recognized that in regards to us, that, even when you're talking about surveys and questionnaires, that there were, just like testing, it wasn't geared towards us. And what she did was
us being Black men,
us being Black men. And what she discovered was, along with Zakia, was, let's come up and come up with something for our Black men. Because now when we're able to do that, a healed man heals another man. A healed man heals in his family. Then he heals in his community, his state, his nation, and of course, the way we're looking, the world, bro. You know what I mean? And that's just is where we're coming. You know,
Absolutely.
Rich, I'm gonna drop back and throw that pass, man. You just take it on in.
Go ahead, Reggie.
Nah, you said a lot about it. Taz started it with the intention of, all right, I'm going to bring the idea, but I don't want to be a face of it. I want this to be something that's towards Black men. That's why even me and Doug being here right now, it's like, yo, this is for Black men, and I want Black men to be in the forefront. So I, just like Doug, I went through the first cohort of the free therapy when they were still working out the kinks, and a lot of the guys that she tried to prop up, I asked her when we got on the team, like, what happened? She like, they didn't want to serve, they didn't want to do it. So I was left, me and Zakia, to carry the torch along with the other few people. Like, they were left to carry the torch, and it was like and I remember she said, like, I reached out to a lot of Black men. They just ignored me. Nobody ignored. And mind you, we talk about how good the service is now, but no one, I don't know what it was, but they didn't want to work with her. So she was like, all right. So me and Doug, once we went through the therapy, it was like, we both reached out like, yo, how can we help? Can we come on the board? She was like, yo, I need y'all on the team because I want this to be something with that Black men are leading and for Black men. Not, I came up with the idea, I came up with the service, but this is a Black men thing. And so shouts out to her and Zai because they held it down when no money was coming in, no funding, no none of that. And people gave up like, all right, this is over. And it was like, no, we believe in this mission. We believe in this movement. We're going to keep it going and rocking. And that's how we kept, we're here today with it.
Hey, Eric, can I get a sign? That's touchdown, right?
No, not only touchdown. Look, it's an extra point too, because shout out to Black women, right? I need to say that like deliberately. Shout out to Black women, right?
Happy Mother's Day, yeah.
You know, happy Mother's Day, all of that. We have a challenge in our community, right? Because that concept, Reggie, of what you just described, not a concept, that experience of what you just described, I hear repeated so frequently from Black women about how they want to hold us down, how they want to see us healed. They want Black men to be better and to be healthier, right? And so often we drop the ball, or we ignore them, or we don't hear or see their vision or respect their vision. And so I can't say that enough, that in taking a moment out of our conversation, Black men heal, shout out to Black women, because without a Black mother, we wouldn't be here, right? So the reality is that, you know, we have to do this collectively, and it takes all of us to be able to do that. So shout out to them for that. You know, my next question is really about, I want to go back to this idea about the feelings and the stigmatism and around mental health. What, in your experience, are some of the biggest issues or biggest problems that you see Black men coming up and coming into these groups with? Are there some common themes, some common topics that come up? What are some of the major things that you see Black men struggling with and coming to therapy for? And this is for either one. I can talk to Reggie or let's start with Reggie.
Honestly, that space, I think Ihsan said it earlier. He said he wanted to challenge us on it. Them conversations are happening. They just weren't happening in a purposeful space. You know what I mean? Like, this is dedicated to this. And so, like, the coaching and player relationship, that's a therapeutic space. The barbershop chair, that's a therapeutic space. Like, even just, and me being honest, Doug just had to have that conversation with me either 6 months ago. It was recently, where it's like, yo, I tell you that I'm here for you. Like, you can open up, but I'm still like, nah, that's not the space for that. And it's like, nah, I'm right here. So there are spaces where they can happen, and they do happen, and people are willing to have it. And I think once you know it's a dedicated space, like, no, this is here for this, that's when people feel open up. Me and Doug have to do it all the time. For one, when we do King's Corner, it's about 90 minutes, and each individual person want to get the, like, you know, personal experience off, and, you know, we could talk, brothers could have that conversation, like, it was 20 of us in here, we can't all just talk for 20 minutes, we don't have enough time for that. So the brothers are ready to explode, they ready to have that conversation. It's just more spaces and more purposeful spaces like this, we need to have them, so that way it's like, no, you could pour out.
Yeah, so once we get, but here's the thing, the question is, once we get those spaces, what are men bringing to you? What are
Mm.
you seeing? What are they revealing?
Go ahead, D. I can add.
I'll tell you one that
the
was,
biggest ones that we had, like one.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
porn
And
addiction.
one of the big ones, it evolved around women and evolved around sex.
Mhm.
We did like one of them things that we don't talk about. We talked about porn.
Mm.
And that one ended up being one of the biggest that we ever dealt with.
Mm.
And we had those guys open up about it, you know, because there are some issues around that, you know. And then, but we go back though. We go back to how we came up. We go back to how we value women.
Mm.
I can only speak for myself. You know, coming up, I valued my mother, but my relationships and the women when I was younger, there was no value. There was no time to actually really, when she expressed herself, for me to listen. You know, and we talk about the ability, you know, to give feedback. It wasn't about that, because it was all about my selfish desires. You know what I mean?
Self-serving.
Yeah. So, you know, and then we have the other ones, the anxiety, the depression. You know, of course, what's going on in our society, dealing with police brutality, racism. You know, those were the big things. And how do we respond? And what we're learning is, even, you know, like I said, King's Corner is not a therapy sessions. It's more like a group. And we talk about the wellness and the psychoeducation, but it gives the men tools on how to react to certain situations. What we, you know, one of the simplest things that's hard for us to do is to take a step back and take a deep breath. You know, because we are, you know, we quick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That, I mean, the first thing that we do, and that's when we talk about that communication, is we throw our guards up.
Yeah.
You know, and that goes back, you know, and that goes back to your past traumas or your past relationships. So there's a lot of reasons why we throw our guards up. So
Yeah.
I
want to touch on that, but go ahead, Ihsan.
I think, first of all, it's a really beautiful thing to see the honor and the system that y'all set up with, you said Zakia and Tez, right? Am I saying the name right? Like, it's really decent to see people create space and then to have the humility to allow other people to carry out their vision. So just want to honor them again. And also just want to acknowledge that y'all were supposed to be there at the time y'all came along. So whoever wasn't there wasn't qualified to do what y'all, or they just weren't destined or purposed for what y'all are doing. So I'm grateful that time lined up, and it lined up with the pandemic. One of the beautiful things about Eric and I and MBKCares, the things that we were already doing at the library, they just wound up transitioning onto this platform. And I know we had y'all on last year, early on in the pandemic. Reggie, I think we had you on about a veterans episode, and Doug, I can't recall the topic we had you on, but we had y'all on last year at different stages. I think it's decent to see how the collective community plays a role, because you're right, it does take therapy. It takes what therapy reveals to you to have you looking at your community, your family different, your past relationships, your current experiences as a father, whatever it may be. But then it's decent to acknowledge, like, there's other steps in there. I remember, Reggie, when I met you, it was that Phil Roundtree session up at Uncle Bobby's where he had the You Good Man sessions, you know, and it was a good space to be able to talk about at that time what was going on with Kobe dying. And somebody made some comments at that time. I can't recall who it was, but somebody made some comments, and we were all discussing relationships and everything. It's decent to see, like if you have a goal to be a vegetarian, it's just not, let me go to this one restaurant once a week and get this done. No, during the week, it may take some things. It may take cutting back on this hair and adding this and this hair. The same thing with the journey to mental wellness. It may take cutting off some things that you consume during the day, but it may take just having a conversation over here and then a conversation over here, feeding yourself different things, because they're all part of the experience. So I just want to acknowledge that y'all are talking about being a part of a holistic journey to mental wellness. And I really thank y'all for the part y'all bring to the table, because it takes all of us. None of us, we're not in competition with y'all. And it's really good to see that we can come together as two different organizations, actually three when you bring in the father in circle, and then maybe more when we talk about other things that y'all are into, and bring them all together for the common goal of we want to be better. And one last thing to touch on the piece you talked about, the sliding scale, that is true. And I think most therapists, if there's anybody out there hearing this and wondering will your therapist take it serious, therapists are willing to meet you where you are. If you're committed to seeing them regularly, they're willing to take the cut, because over the year or over the time that you commit to, they'll probably make even more money and see more growth and results from your own therapy going on. My therapist met me with a sliding scale when I was willing to say, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. And I've been with my therapist for 2.5 years now. So they do meet you where you are. So I wanted to say that. And then the last part with that was the EAP program at jobs. It's confidential. A lot of people don't realize that that resource is there, but the employee assistance program, a lot of city jobs offer it. It's usually 3 to 5 sessions for free, and you're able to see a therapist, and it's totally confidential. What you discuss with the therapist does not get back to your job. All they do is verify that you work at this job, and then they send you to a therapist that's not even anywhere connected to your job. The one I go through is Penn Behavioral Health. I get 3 free sessions through my job's insurance or whatever. And then once you're done those 3 sessions, it kicks into your insurance or the sliding scale, whatever you already had. So I encourage people to look into the resources besides just paid therapy. EAP, Black Men Hill, other types of resources are there.
Great, you know where I'm at. Let's go, baby.
Probably paying for therapy and don't even know it. They probably taking money out your check already for you to go to therapy, and you don't even know
And
it.
you don't know it.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yo, we're going to share those resources again when we get towards the end of the conversation. So don't worry too much about that. We're definitely going to share those and more. I want to go back to a little bit about the genesis of Black Men Heal, and specifically what you guys shared. Like you said that you guys went through the free therapy sessions, right? And got a chance to experience what new clients are experiencing now. And I'm assuming you got a chance to tweak it a little bit, but how has Black Men Heal helped you personally? What were your expectations when you first got involved? And did it meet or exceed your expectation? What was that experience like before you became on the other side of the counseling session? Reggie?
For me, it was amazing. I think Doug spoke on it earlier because, and he said it that what separates Black Men Hill from any other organization that does provide free therapy or that does go through that is the matchmaking process of it. And when I really and I've experienced the matchmaking process of it because no, that's a humble brag. It's like I'd like to think of myself a well-intelligent guy, and so I'm going in there like already like, yeah, I know this, you can't really teach me. So I'm going there with a little chip on my shoulder. And luckily, so if they paired me with somebody my age, I probably would have tried to discredit them, strip them apart, or whatever the case may be. They gave me an older gentleman by the name of George, and shout out to George. And I think he was either, I can't remember his age, but I told him I came in there with that same energy. He was like, okay, Reginald, okay. I just want you to know everything has a beginning, middle, and end. And he was like, wherever you start, we're going to start there. And I can run with you. I've been in the game for X amount of years. I have this, and this. I'm like, all right, now it humbled the guy down. And we had that conversation where now I trusted him. I think D. Reed said it earlier. I trusted him with me and what I was trying to accomplish within my therapeutic process. And so my therapist wasn't the same as Doug's therapist, and and that was a key because I needed who I needed for my process, and I think it works in that capacity because at the end of it, he was able to give me rides, he gave me job opportunities, he gave me all these different things. Where again, if it was somebody else, I probably wouldn't have had that same therapeutic relationship if it was someone else.
That's
dope. And for me, same thing. You know, the matchmaking was excellent in regards to. As far as my therapist, and of course, you know, a lot of us are sports guys. You know, I coach basketball and community college basketball, so there was a common interest. But once again, it was the opportunity that the therapist allowed you to talk. You know, as men, you know, we have a tendency, you know, we'll start blabbering, but then when we start talking about who we really are, that's when it actually starts to get revealed. And then things that were revealed in my life that I never gave attention to. Because what happens is, I think I can only speak for myself, the traumas and everything that I had in my past, I choose to ignore it. You know, when I ignore it, there's no pain. You know what I mean? But when you address it, when you talk about it, and then you're able to overcome it, there was situations in my life that I didn't realize I was going through anxiety, that he expressed to me, or I didn't realize that I was in a state of depression, not knowing it when it was revealed through our sessions as we started to talk about it. And he's like, yo, bro, that's actually, those are signs of depression that you're in. But you don't, when you're going through crisis, you ain't giving nothing no validity. It's just survival mode. You're in the thing of survival. And one of the things, and that's what happened with King's Corner, because now when we developed King's Corner, I didn't continue the therapy, because, there were some things I felt I was healed from. But then we come up with King's Corner and everything that we're talking about. So I'm being re-educated about, mental health, and like I said, and we do it like we're going on 50 weeks, and it doesn't even feel like it, just because, one of the things that I can say, and well, all of us, we all servants, man. And when you're a servant and you have the ability to give back, and then you see the fruits of your labor, or you've seen the guys able to express themselves or open themselves up to you. Come on, man, that nothing beats that. Not in my eyes, anyway.
Yeah. I want to touch on something. Ihsan, I'm going to come to you and ask you a similar question, but I want to touch on something that you said, Doug, because you said, if I'm not thinking about it, if I put it out of my mind, I don't feel the pain. But is that accurate, or does the pain just show up in a different part of your life in a different way?
Well, for me is once I bring it back and I choose not to ignore it. Now I have the steps on how to cope with it. So it doesn't, I guess, for lack of better words, it doesn't become a majority, it becomes a minority. You know what I mean? Because of the steps that I learned in the healing process. So now I'm able to actually deal with it. And then now, and one of the things about it too, one of the things I say, like, we can all tell a story, but we all can't share a story. So in that healing process, and even talking to that therapist, I was able to not only tell my story, I was able to share my story. And when you're able to share your story, just like we're doing now on a public venue across the World Wide Web, that's healing.
I wanted to add to that, before you go to Ihsan, that question, man. It wasn't until it started affecting other people that I started to realize that it was a problem. So it wasn't until it started affecting my relationship with the mother of my children and our relationship being, spouses. It wasn't until it started affecting my relationships as a father. It wasn't until, family relationships, job, like those things is when I started, because I care about them people. And it was like, I guess I didn't know how to care about myself. I didn't know that before therapy, I didn't know that I had multiple suicide attempts. Before therapy, I didn't know what depression was, and that I had bouts of depression where I just would not care about losing a job, not care about washing up, doing all that stuff. I had anxiety. I'm in therapy now, thank God, and still doing these different things. But I didn't know I was okay for it to affect me. Like, to me, like I think Doug said it earlier, it was just survival. Like, no, I could just take my punches, and if it messed me up, I'm cool. That's just what it is. It wasn't until it started to affect the loved ones and the people around me when I'm like, oh, I gotta take this serious. It is something going on. Let me, handle that.
Ihsan.
I think I peel back this onion every time that I'm in therapy or think about things. I actually wanted to ask y'all something before I go on to something. Has serving other people along their journey of mental health, has it helped you all heal as well?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Because I found that to be true for me. Like when I had a suicide plan October 16, 2018, and I found myself outside of the library that wound up being the home base for our community night gatherings. So being in there, every time I walked in the doors of that library, I remember seeing myself sitting outside of there with a plan to take my life, and now in here helping other people to not think that kind of way. So I really just think that it's really dope how our healing takes all these other layers of just process. But I really think, Doug, you talked about something that touched me personally. When you mentioned how y'all talked about porn, I guess, on the King's Corner, when you start peeling back the onions of your trauma and all that, you realize like it's so many conditions to it. It's not just like the easy one is to say my dad wasn't there. That's true for most of us. That's there for me, right? But then there's layers to your trauma that have to deal with the overprotection of a mother. There's trauma that has to do with maybe a bullying experience. I still remember being slapped in the back of the head in middle school and somebody slapping me, and I was afraid to turn around and fight the guy. And I knew who did it, but I turned around and said who did it. But when I saw him, like, I don't want that. I realized like those types of things play out in adulthood in types of ways, even the way we parent. So I'm just really grateful that y'all are talking about what the space allows, because there's so many layers to it. I just encourage everybody out there who's thinking about therapy to take the first step and not to be afraid of what you see. And then even y'all in the servanthood that you are taking on as the mantle, don't be afraid of the things you see, because it teaches you to be more honest with yourself. Doug was just talking about like things that actually about lying to yourself. I realized like I was lying to myself when I didn't tell myself you have a gambling problem or you have an addiction to sex or whatever it may have been. I was lying to myself to think I'm okay. And a lot of it came from being responsible in certain areas that kept me from being open to areas I was being irresponsible. So I'm able to go to work, I'm able to take care of my kids, but I'm not able to keep this secret from being a secret in my life instead of eradicating it altogether. I really just appreciate the process that y'all are talking about. Y'all describing it in a way where people would see it, and then you're living it and you're participating with other people. I wanted to ask Eric a question because you had the opportunity to be on their program as one of the hosts, I believe, for King's Corner. Can you elaborate on what it was like for you being not just a viewer, but a participant in that process?
Yeah, I can. Thank you for that question, Ihsan. First of all, it was an honor to even be offered the space, right? Because as men, there's a combination of feelings, right? It's a lot of us as men have the ego to think that we can lead and think that we can talk to other men and tell them something that's going to be beneficial. But it's another thing to be put in that position and recognize the weight and the responsibility that those men who show up in that space have, right? And they put that responsibility in your hands because it's about their healing and their well-being. And it really is a situation that you become your brother's keeper. And so that's the thing that really struck me, was how to navigate it. And honestly, the session that I spoke about, or the topic that I spoke about, was related to the death of Walter Wallace Jr.
Wow.
And how we as a community could address the issue of our fellow brothers and community members having mental health crises out in public, right? Many of the people on the block were aware that he struggled with that. But you juxtapose that with the number of video cameras and cell phone cameras that recorded that incident, right? And so for me, it was an honor, but it was also bittersweet, but an opportunity to talk to men about how we need to put the phones down, put the cameras down, put the screens down, and step forward and develop like more impactful personal relationships. I'm sure that there was somebody on that block that was closer to him than any EMT or police officer that could have been called. And so for me, that's where that came in at. And it was a powerful experience to be asked to share my thoughts and experiences in that space. I'm just grateful that the brothers opened up the space for me to be there.
It's really decent. I really admire how they bring that platform together, but then involve the community and people who are experts from all over, or not just experts, but people with experience. I know before we got live today, we were talking about opportunities that come along that the world might not say we're qualified for. Like, I don't have my degree, and Doug and I, we were talking about how the platforms, just God being gracious to us, has put us in places where we're able to speak to people who may have a level of like a master's degree or whatever. But it's just really decent that God has equipped certain people and given us opportunities, and it's a humbling experience, and it's a blessing. What I got out of all of these things, knowing all of y'all and hearing you all speak. I think it's amazing how God is not only allowing us to heal, but then putting us in places that aren't necessarily just called mental health spaces, but spaces of professions where you're now going to be a healed man there. Doug, you being a coach, you're able to be a Black male coach, to be able to mentor on a certain level or just influence somebody's life while you're on your own journey to healing, or just having an awareness of what that looks like for a person. So you're able to coach from a perspective of care and concern. And Reggie, I don't know, I can't remember what I saw, but it was something about an opportunity career-wise. I don't know if you're comfortable talking about it, but I remember you posted something on social media about a new job opportunity you got in the last couple of months or so. Would you like to talk about that? Because I think it's really decent to see somebody with this type of mantle being put in other places to be able to carry out purposes that are greater than just the job title.
Yeah, no, it's funny because and I'll briefly speak on it. The work that we were doing with Black Men Hill actually got me the job. They seemed like, all right, we want you to do what you do here. So I'm like, the same role I have with Black Men Hill is what they pay me to do at work. So it always like work in the same capacity. I'm the community outreach coordinator for Black Men Hill. At work, I'm the community engagement support. And so now they got funding and resources to provide to the community. And so now I can still do what I do, but do it on there. So I do it at Drexel University as a community engagement support. And just trying, and I work for a health center under that guys are providing different things to the community. Actually, one of the initiatives is they wanted me to create a men's health council, started by men, just discussing different topics monthly about men's needs. How can we, do something about diabetes? How can we do something about high cholesterol? All of these different initiatives, but let men lead them. Just like how we having this conversation, like, no, this is the programs and this is how we can offer it, because we need these things and we need to figure out a way to solve these problems.
Oh, no, that's really great.
Let me make a quick comment. Just something that hit me as Ihsan was talking about coaching, and I was thinking, being the servants that we are, and not knowing, let's say, our healing process, and I was thinking about myself, was I doing it because being a servant, because it was kind of covering up my past traumas? You know what I mean? That just hit me, like, and the things that I do, I like you guys, I work with kids, I've done a lot. And we always, even our own children, we always are talking to them and trying to give them, direction. We don't want them to really have the experience, like real talk. We don't want them to have the experience. We want them to be able to, for us to give them the direction for them to follow. What happens is, of course, they fall off and, here comes the experience. But I was just thinking, is a reason and a passion behind everything that I've done, or the passion behind everything that we've done, was that evolving thing based on our traumas or our past that we didn't want anybody else to experience. And that's why we put so much into it.
I real quick, because I know we're closing out soon. Ihsan,
wow.
I had to write it down. You made something about like the guy bullying you in school. When you said that, I didn't even think about it. I have a similar experience, but it plays into today that I didn't even realize that, no, I got to get to the gym because ain't nobody about to pick on me. Yeah. I knew he was doing like a trick where like he put all these cards out and was like, all right, I'm gonna pick you. I know which card you got. And I went to go bend down and he threw the deck of cards at my head, and I knew who did it, and I knew I was mad. It's like, it was just a joke. And I'm like, I should have beat him up. So now I'm like still holding on to that anger. Like, yo, it's like, bro, that was like in 2000 and whatever, and you still holding on to that. But I resonated with that experience. So I wanted to say that. Then you spoke on serving and it being like how it's helping us. I think that's one of the parts of the 7 Steps program in AA. I've never been, but I'm assuming that
12
it is.
steps.
Where you 12 steps. I put 7 steps down there. Well, where you're supposed to be a supporter person, and that's helping you healing. And so I wanted to make sure I put that out there because I think that's a part of your healing. That's why they put it in the program. And then Eric coming back to host King's Corner, Doug, I wanted to make sure I put it out there so we can get him back on.
Yeah, and look, and they just gave us another King's Corner topic, which is bullying.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bullying. Ihsan, that's how we met, right?
Yeah.
The No Bullying Coalition. So
yeah.
Yeah, no, this is all dope. This is all dope. And I listen, you guys have brought up so many different things. I'm kind of like almost veering off from some of the questions that we had prepared before. But it makes me think of one of the particular questions around, you both, Reggie and Ihsan, you both talked about experiences, young people being bullied. We all, grow up in that kind of environment. And I think one of the things why it's so pervasive is because it's almost seen as normal. It's normalized, right? And we haven't figured out a way to address it appropriately so it doesn't become normalized. And that leads to young people being harmed anywhere from just one incident that we live with remembering, right? Because I have a story about this boy, Jason. Jason used to get on my nerves all the time. One, because he was a handsome dude. Like, he was way too handsome for junior high school. I don't know how he did it. He had waves, he always had fresh kicks. He got on my nerves just from that. But then he was also a little bit of bully. And so I remember running down the hall. It was another one of those getting tapped in the back of the head, and you turn around, and I chased him. But he used to do this weird thing where he would like kick his feet up behind him. And so every time I got close, he would kick me in the shins because he was like running. I was like, how do you know how to do that? So again, and I'm over 50 years old, and I still remember Jason doing that to me. So we bring our traumas with us, right? Until we learn to unpack them, we're going to continue to carry them. And so that leads me to my next question about, we live in a society that's traumatized, right? We live in a society that's constantly, one of the things we talk about in the fathering circle is how we live in an oppressive society. And as men, we learn to oppress one another. And then that often trickles down to oppressing women and children, right? So because we live in this oppressive, traumatizing society, what are some ways that we can address this ongoing system of trauma? What does healing look like for a community that's continuously steeped in trauma? How do we start that? And what does healing look like for a community in trauma?
Can I touch this?
I got an answer too, but Ihsan, go ahead. I got an answer.
Listening to the things that for one, therapy is huge. Being honest with yourself and listening to the things. I don't know if this happens for y'all, is like, I don't know if y'all all are fathers, but experience I had with fathering, right? Sometimes I find myself saying something to my son, and then I kind of like imagine, what if I heard that? Or what if God said that same type of thing to me? So it's like being honest about what it is that you're delivering is huge, because then you can start thinking about what am I giving out, and would I take the same type of thing? What am I projecting? The way I parent my son, sometimes my oldest son, sometimes I find myself making sure that he's not the recipient of the bullying or mistreatment or whatever. And then I can overparent him, living my experience through my son. So I think that one thing to prevent certain trauma is to not try to project it, because we can easily see it in projection of abuse, but it can also be done in negligence. It could be done in overparenting. It could just be done in a way of like not fully loving care, being done in a way where it's self-serving, even the way that we parent or whatever. Reggie, you got it from here. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent about some personal experience, but I want you to follow up.
No, I was just going to use my again, what you just said, personal experience. I was going through all of the things that I was going through, and I'm like, all right, I got to find a solution. So I started doing my own. So the first step I would say is starting with yourself. And so I started doing my own digging, which led me to my father not being there. And I say he was in and out of my life up to about 22, 20, around that age where I'm like, yo, I don't even know this guy. So now we repair this relationship. Me and him, I call him right now. He get mad at me when I don't call him. And so now, and it's like, all right, that's the roles reversed now. So we repaired that relationship. Me and my relationship with my fiance, we were in couples therapy. We went to counseling. Now I got two sons. I have conversations around mental health around with them. And now he feels that open space of having that. My mother more recently just started opening up, because I forgot my mother was somebody else before she became a mom. She was a woman. She was a young somebody's daughter, and now she's having conversation with mental health, mental wellness. But that all started from me just doing that individual work. And then they wanted to do, and that's just family. Now I take the things that I've learned and did with myself, and I get to go under an organization and spread that same, experience of, like we say, heal men, and put it out to the masses and start healing, different other situations, community, different brothers, I'm a Caribbean first generation man. I can go in the island now and have that conversation. But that all started from me just doing that one simple task of working with myself.
Beautiful. Doug?
And I think it goes back to what you guys represent. Am I my brother's keeper? I mean, in platforms like this, conversations like this, and we said it to show people, to show these young guys. I mean, we're in a social media thing now where, you can see platforms, but positive platforms like this and what they represent can actually heal a whole community. They see, they see you in the city or on television. They see Ihsan working overnight, staying up late just to come to this platform because it's so important for what we do. And it goes back to the love. It goes back to the self-care. One thing that we have to learn, even as young men, is that self-care. Being able to take care of ourselves and appreciate who we are and to love ourselves. And then we gotta, I know for me, one of the biggest things is probably forgiveness. Like all the traumas, all the pains and everything that we dealt with, it's usually probably on having the ability to forgive somebody. And like we talked about, bringing it back to, the fathering thing. I dealt with, I feel like he's going on my own personal thing, but, I dealt with, my father being killed at an early age. And when I really was old enough to really figure it out, I was 4. And then when I realized what happened, he got shot in the head over an argument of who was the oldest. So things like that, when we're able, and that's why I said it's so important that we can express our stories, because now it's a healing process. If I'd have told this a while ago, I would have broke down in tears. Like, yo, that'd be like, Doug, finish the conversation. We understand the hurt. But having this kind of platform, just to take into account, am I my brother's keeper? So somebody in my community that I see possibly can be going off straight or not, doing the things, am I able to talk to him? And even just to say those simple words to him, to a young boy or older man, and say, I'm your brother's keeper. I'm your keeper. I do love you, man. I do love you. I do respect you. You know what? You understand what I'm saying? So just having this, and going back to y'all, that's why I appreciate what you guys do. And the title in itself, I think it just speaks volumes. And the more that people are able to see this, we're able to heal our communities, because we're talking about it openly. There's nothing, we have questions, but the fact that it's so authentic in our conversation speaks volumes.
That's beautiful, man. And thank you for sharing that. I think the thing about what we're doing, and this is another reason why it's so important to continue these conversations, because I know for a fact as men, like we're socialized, we're trained to avoid that awkward, vulnerable thing that just happened between the 4 of us, right? When you start talking and you get passionate and your tears well up and you get uncomfortable, we're socialized to avoid that. So we'll throw a joke in there real quick. Then we'll slap somebody on the back and be like, oh man, you all right, you know what I mean? Right. And so I think it's important to sit in the moment with what's been shared and just really sit with that, and really appreciate the words and the feelings and the sentiments that have come through. I want to go down another path of questioning, but I'm just wondering, Ihsan, how much time we have, and if you have any other thoughts that you want to share.
It depends on how much time they have, honestly. But I definitely had a thought that I wanted to go along with what Doug just said about forgiveness, man. Some of the things that come up in therapy can cause you to be mad at somebody from your past, right? So, or even yourself. So forgiveness is so key, because, and learning what forgiveness even looks like. Forgiveness isn't just saying I forgive you, but taking the steps so when it comes back up, remembering to say, I'm not going to show anger or evil to this person or even to myself because of something I did or I said or whatever. Forgiveness is huge, man, because when you start looking back, my dad wasn't around when I was young, right? But I had to learn, like I became a father of children in broken homes. So then I started looking different and saying, you know what? It's not because this person is a bad person, it's because a relationship failed, right? And I had failed relationships that become broken homes. So then I get to, there's a level of understanding, but forgiveness is not just understanding, like I went through this and can do this, but forgiving something you don't even understand. Forgiving somebody just because they made a mistake or a misstep, and realizing that the people who are in your life are making decisions off of the trauma or lack thereof that they experienced too. Like you talked about, like your mom was a person before. My mom was a person, my dad was a person, and they came up in times that are different than when we're coming up, and we're seeing the George Floyd stuff and everything. Some of our parents were walking this earth at a time where it was colored bathrooms and stuff. Like their experiences are different than ours. Like their idea of love, of acceptance, of where they fit in this world are so different. I think that it's a beautiful thing. I'm gonna keep going on and on about Black Man Hill. Y'all started with the pandemic. We had no idea last year what was to follow Kobe's death and the pandemic starting. We didn't know Breonna Taylor was coming, and Ahmaud Arbery, I think he died around this time, and George Floyd was last May. We didn't know all those things were coming, that we were going to have to be even more intentional about sitting in it ourselves as wounded healers, but then helping other people along the way who may not even know where to turn when facing the trauma, the resentment, the feelings, all those things that come up. So I just really want to acknowledge that it's good to see that there are things in place. And the final thought that hit me, man, was it took years for me to realize, like, being my brother's keeper wasn't just meaning keep having the funeral over and over again. Because for a while we were having these concerts at Love Park that were just remembering my brother, but then realizing, like, there's homeless people out here. Their struggle and their stories are different than just suicide. It may be whatever, meet this need right now. And then realizing, like, I had to actually ask God, give me a heart for the people that I'm going to come in touch with, because it can't just be about Atif all the time and reliving his funeral and telling people about suicide. It has to be about, how do you systemically build up your community, job opportunities, discussing things that are just going to promote hope and opportunities and optimism in people and belief, and like undo some of the trauma. But I just encourage anybody out there who's hearing this to make your personal experience something that is beyond your personal experience. Allow it to come from personal experience when it comes to humility, but allow it to transition where you are concerned about the interests of other people and put yourself in other people's shoes. And that's what you're seeing here with Black Men Heal. People who are wounded healers along the journey, dealing with their trauma, but reaching back for other people.
Wanted to add real quick to that a few things. Hopefully I remember them. I didn't write them down this time. You said something, Ihsan, earlier about last year being one of the most traumatic years, that we didn't even expect all of them things to come through. When we spoke on it earlier, Black Men Hill was founded in 2018. From 2018 to 2020, it was all a labor of love. Again, that was even before me and Doug got there. It was all a labor of love. Providers provided their services for free. The people that was operating it was doing it for free. And the gift and the gift and the curse of 2020 was it became the biggest funded year for Black Men Hill, because now a service that was already in place and was ready to serve, now people saw the importance of it and was like, all right, we need somewhere to put the funding towards it so we can start doing it. So now we pay the providers and we pay these different people to do these services for Black Men Hill and to have these different healing happening. It started out just in Pennsylvania, and now we're in Jersey, Delaware, Georgia, DMV. I forgot the other states. We're in DMV.
South Carolina.
Yeah, it's expanding, and not even to say that they're brag, but it's like now we have funding to provide more, safe spaces throughout the country, and hopefully eventually the world. And so we just want to, acknowledge that. Please support these organizations like MBK, My Brother's Keeper, because it really does have these conversations keep advancing. Because sometimes, like you said, serving is like, yeah, keep pushing it. Like, I want to have these conversations more and still be able to continue these services more and more. Eric, you asked me something earlier, and it just hit me when you said like leave that space of that awkwardness between like we have these type of conversations. Then you throw a joke in there, you throw something in there. One of our biggest ones that I forgot to mention, and Doug will remember it because me and him, that was the first time we kind of had that interaction, was Black Men Need Hugs. And that came out of me saying like, if I never had a hug from a male, like I never had a hug before. And I don't even know what I would do if a man just came up and like, hugged me and then, held me in some capacity. So that awkwardness, it was like, you know what, let's make a King's Corner topic out of it. Man, that was one of the best, conversations that you don't even realize that you got the side hug where you don't want to be too close, and you just then you got the pat hug, like, all right, go in. But have you ever been bear hug? What is that significant? And it was like, wait, you didn't even realize all of these different things has these different plays and a part of like emotionally being, tied to certain things. So I just want to bring that up.
There is something. I'm so glad you brought that up because I've noticed this years ago. And tell me that we don't do this, right? What about the handshake with the arm in between when we go to hug another brother? We're going to grab the hands, keep our arms in between us because we got to keep that distance, right? We gripping each other's hand because that's that sign of strength and that competition, but we don't want to be that physically close to another man. So in case I got to push you away, right? It's a whole psychosis behind that. And we don't even talk about that. So
well, you know what? I'm glad you said that, Eric, because I'm writing it down because that thing was so big that we actually having a part 2. Black Men Need Hugs part 2.
When is that?
Need hugs.
Yeah, I gotta look at the date.
We're gonna be whenever you get the dates and information, we definitely
because that thing was huge, man. And it brought out what it did was it revealed so much. Yeah. Coming out of that, even why we need the hugs. I mean, one of the things that we know, especially in a grieving process, who can actually go up to another man, give him a hug of support and love, and then when you experience that, man, to be honest, there's no experience. That's a great experience because all it's saying is, I support you. It's another King's topic too, Reg, black male support.
Writing it down.
I mean, I'm taking notes like you would.
Hey, Ihsan, you writing these stuff down too? We need topics too. But with the work that I do with fathers and children, you would be amazed if we start really digging into the levels of how Black men are unloved and taught to not love, right? Because what's more natural and human than a hug? Babies naturally walk up to you like this, right? It's a natural human behavior and human connection. And what happens a lot of times is, and this is scientifically proven, that Black boys get fewer hugs, less attention, and less acknowledgement as children than any other children. And so that physical distance, that creates a psychological and emotional distance. And then boys in general get fewer physical attention and hugs and kisses than girls do. And so what does that do to us psychologically and how we're supposed to respond to one another? Right.
That came out of that was the part of the topic, because I was telling him my baby son, he comes up to me like that, so I give him a hug. But my oldest son, I don't just go up and like, yo, come here, son, or I don't just go up. It's like weird. So now I've been more intentional, and even since the conversation, still haven't done it to the capacity that it probably should be done, and it's still working on it because I still have the awkwardness was in me and that distance, like you just said. Like I'm still psychologically trying to break that barrier that has been brought on to me because my dad wasn't around to give me a hug. One time he recently did it when he came to visit me. He lives in North Carolina, and I felt so awkward. I'm like, I don't even know what to do. Like, it's
just
weird.
The arms is just
and so I'm still learning that process. But it was a big conversation because you realize that a lot of men go through that, like you said, Eric. That from the yay high of like, don't cry, get up, dust it off, where little girls may get hugged and get nurtured in that capacity. So still learning it from my end.
Reggie and Doug, are y'all encouraged about the direction that conversations about healing are going? Like the direction our world is going? Are y'all encouraged by it?
I am. I mean, one, because it's been unnoticed for so long. Like I think I'll say the world didn't take an account for our healing. You know, the world took an account that they'll deal with it. They'll deal with whatever problems or situations they're having. You know, that was my perspective even back then. Now it's become like, you know, there's a healing process that's needed for Black men. You know, they do have the same issues and problems as everybody else, and they don't have to carry it on their shoulders. Let them have the male support. Let them have the therapist. Let them have an accountability partner within that community for them to get through a process. Yeah, so I'm encouraged about it, especially, you know, COVID, unfortunately, you know, what it brung, but COVID actually brought a whole nother level of awareness to who we are. You know, even when we talk about even ourselves, and I know, you know, each one of you during this COVID time period had to go back and reflect on how can I be a better man? What are some of the things that I can do differently to make not only for myself, but for my family, and of course, what you guys are doing right now for the community.
What you, Reggie?
I'll add, I struggle with this conversation because I don't want to. I try to be realistic in it. Whereas, like, all right, for example, we'll both have the people feel comfortable having that conversation about fathering with Eric, or they'll probably feel more comfortable having that conversation around suicide around you, Ihsan, or even with us with Black Men Hill, they'll have the conversation around mental health with the capacity. But are they having it outside of us? And I don't know because I'm not there. Like I'm not a fly on the wall to know if it's really happening or is it only happening because all I see on my timeline or conversation I have is around mental wellness, mental health. But I don't want to, you know, if you're a football player, you're going to hear a lot more about football than a non-football player. Yeah. And so you're going to be like, yeah, everybody talking about football. It's like, no, that's just in your world. And so I don't know. I still don't know if it's a real conversation. It feels like it though. To answer your question, it feels like it, but I don't know if it's really happening to the capacity that it could be.
What about you, Eric?
I think it is. I think it is. And I think, you know, we are forced to talk about it because what the pandemic did is that the pandemic, unfortunately, broke a lot of people, right? The pandemic, there were people that already barely holding it together, that the pandemic forced them to just lose it all away. And I think, and this is the topic for another conversation. This is going to be the MBKCares, so don't write this one down first. But the topic for our next conversation is going to be the mental health roots of gun violence. I see the mental health, and honestly, you know, everybody needs to be talking about this. So I would love for y'all to cover this subject. But I do feel like there's a mental health component to the violence that we've been seeing, right? Because again, people are breaking, people are broken, people are pushed into situations and across limits by the circumstances that have come up by the pandemic that they haven't had to face before. Everybody, by all standards, what we've just witnessed with 2020, most people have not seen within their lifetime, right? And so that's a global changing event. That's why they call it a pandemic, right? Because it spans the entire globe. And so as a result of that, similar to what Reggie, you were just talking about, the amount of information that's being shared about it was toxic. I know for me, my personal well-being and my personal journey started in the pandemic with dealing with the loss of my sister, the week of the shutdown, and then working in a city government position that required me to follow the press conferences every day and to hear about the numbers of deaths and the numbers of cases and how things were shutting down every day. Wow. And that kind of burden really weighs on you. I know I can speak from a personal standpoint of view that I was journaling, I was walking, I was meditating. I was doing all kinds of stuff. I was this close to a seance to try to figure out how I could manage and how I could navigate all of that pressure. So I just imagine people that didn't have the resources and tools or the mind or the bandwidth to even self-assess and figure out like, hey, something is wrong here. So I really do think that there's that there's a mental health component to a lot of the negativity we've seen. And because of that, the world is talking about it more. You guys just described it when you talked about how in 2018, Black Men Heal was just this one thing. And now you're in multiple states at this point, right? That's an improvement. That means people are talking about it. I just got off a phone call earlier with another organization, EMOC, right? EMOC is under the Department of Behavioral Health and Intellectual Disability Services, another organization that serves people with mental health challenges. So is it being talked about? Yeah, absolutely. Do I feel confident about it? Absolutely. But do we have a long way to go? Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm really encouraged by it too. And I'm personally challenged and convicted to make sure that our motives and that our operations stay pure. And that's one thing I really admire about Black Men Heal and other organizations that I've seen who were there before things went bad. Like you were in place, yeah, Philly, with the work they do with the young people. Like different organizations who were already here and had a heart, they were just already in place before it started. So I am encouraged to see it. And for our world, I'm just encouraged because it's more acknowledgement. Like there's acknowledgement that there's a fire alarm to pull. We see it on the wall now. Before we had all these fires going on inside, we didn't know where to turn. At least now, although it's commercialized, Black mental health, I looked on TV today, it's constantly mental health, mental health, mental health, this mental health moment. So there's a point where it's a topic, but what is the content? And I believe that the things that we're providing and the things that other people who are doing it in a particular way, it's the content, it's the heart behind it. It's not just the topic of mental health. We could say,
hey, let me jump in there real quick, Ihsan, because Reggie said something earlier about this idea, and like it's showing up on our timeline, but you don't know if it's being talked about where it needs to be talked about. And I think it is up to us, both Black Men Heal and MBK Cares, and all of us as individuals, because the way that the conversation gets transformed is at the water cooler, right? It's those situations where something is shared tonight that strikes a person and they take one thing away from it and they'll go to their colleague or they'll go to their girlfriend or their boyfriend or husband, they'll go to their kids and be like, yo, heard this thing, you know what I mean? And they said this one thing. That's where that's the conversation that needs to happen. And so I'm happy with any individual one-on-one conversations that are occurring that get people to start thinking about that. So I just wanted to throw that piece in there. So
yeah, I've seen it with you and I. Like meeting you, it taught me like beyond the work, because you didn't know. I mean, you met me 2 years ago. Last April of 2019, we met. But to be able to talk about the burden or the blessed responsibility of carrying on my brother's legacy, but also being somebody, when people see, they think about suicide prevention or mental health. But what about when it's dark for me? You know what I'm saying? So to be able to have somebody else take time to be around me and invest in me is so important. So I'm grateful that I'm able to I got a water cooler partner to talk to you, and I'm sure Reggie and Doug bounce things off of each other and realize God's hand over partnerships and everything. And something you just said is really key, man. Not that we're greater than anybody, but we are responsible for what we want to see in this world. We can be the change we want to see. So we can set the tone for what conversations are happening. And it's not to call out other organizations who aren't doing it or people who aren't doing it, but just to say, this is how we do it over here. In the same way we parent, the same way we do other relationships. If you want to emulate it, here is free.
And the reason why we're able to do that and what makes it important is that you're conscious, right? Once you become conscious of the issue or you become aware of a solution, you have a responsibility to share it. And so a lot of people will go back to sleep, right? You wake up, you get conscious, it's too bright, I don't want to deal with this, you know what I mean? They go back into their shell. But if you really are about change and really about helping people, once you become aware of that, you have no choice but to be that wounded healer that you were talking about. And something you said earlier that's been sticking with me for a while, this idea of forgiveness, right? You were talking about why forgiveness is important. And this actually ties into the mental health piece and the gun violence piece and all that we're talking about. The piece of what makes forgiveness effective, real forgiveness, is empathy, right? You can't really forgive somebody if you can't relate to them in some kind of way about what they did, why they did it, where they were, whether there was a mental state or state of crisis. Anybody that says they forgive somebody and doesn't understand where that person is coming from, you can't really forgive them because you have no point of reference. And so I think that empathy piece is big. And the reason why I say it relates to the violence piece is that think about how strong of a person you have to be to be in a situation where you could retaliate. I often think about Stanley Crawford, Black male community counsel, right? And he talks about his son being murdered and how he actually knew who it was, and they actually contemplated retaliating, right? Think about the strength that it takes to know something like that, but then to have the empathy to recognize that there was something else going on with that person that caused you harm. That's the root for me. That's the root of forgiveness. It's that piece about empathy and understanding that we're all struggling. I think it was Doug earlier that said something about that. Like, we're all going through something. We all have some type of trauma that we're carrying with us. And if we recognize that the next person also have some trauma, I think we'd be less likely to snap on them and less likely to take our angers or our issues out on other people. So,
if I can just say one thing about the forgiveness piece, of course, there's people that, we have to forgive. But then there's one person that we have to forgive, and that's ourselves. And that takes a lot of doing as well. That, we have to learn how to forgive ourselves. None of us have been perfect in our relationships or, things that we've done. We've never been perfect. So there's times where we talk about the accountability of ourselves, that we have to learn how to forgive ourselves, and it's so important when we talk about the mental health aspect, and we talk about the wellness. Reg knows that 8 dimensions of wellness, which is my baby, and I even termed it like it's F passier, I put a little French in it. So y'all ain't know I knew French. So, we talk about the financial aspect, even in what's going on as far as, we see the stocks, but we talking about within our community as far as being financially secure and not having the bad debt. We talk about the physical, which is mainly what we know, we get the workout in, we get the walks in, we get the riding the bikes in, we talk about occupationally what our work and the jobs that we do. And then the one aspect of it, the spiritual sense, there's got to be a spiritual part of that, because there's a higher being than we know. For mine is Jesus Christ. It may be somebody else, it may be Allah or whatever, Buddhism, whatever you practice. And then we talk about it socially. This is the part of that socially, being able to interact with each other, being able to interact with others, emotionally and our mental, which speaks volumes. And of course, environmental, about around our surroundings and what's going on in our world. So, those tools that I've learned, and the people need to kind of take account for, those 8 dimensions of wellness. Doesn't have to be balanced in every category, but there should be something that you're touching. There should be something that you're spending time with God. There should be that you're working out. There should be time that you're socializing with your friends. There should be time where you take an account for where your money going, and so much more. So this is what it's all about. I mean, I keep hearing in my head, am I my brother's keeper? The answer is yes.
Yes, you are.
Reggie,
Yes, you are.
you look like you had something you wanted to share.
Nah, that was about the forgiveness piece. Once I learned. All right, so let me backtrack. Earlier this year, I was taking a training for work, and one of the things it taught me the difference between was sympathy and empathy. And sympathy is to feel something for someone. Just you don't have to have no relations. Like yo, I feel sorry for you. Empathizing with someone requires you to connect something within yourself, within something within them, and so now you can literally feel it. Like you literally feel it, and once you empathize and it makes you feel what they feel, you understand the mindset. And so now once I learned that, I'm like, oh, that's what empathy was. But I go back to when I forgave my father after his absence and the things that he was going through. I literally had my son the same time he had his first child, which was my sister. And knowing how I was during that age bracket, knowing and just seeing how I'm like, oh, you wasn't prepared to have me. You wasn't prepared to be a father. You wasn't prepared. You left not thinking, "All right, I'm gonna hurt the kids." I'm you leaving because it's like, yo, I don't even know what's going on with me. I'm still a kid, and so I always say I don't agree with the decision that you made, but I understand why you made it. And my mom get mad when I say it, but it's like I just understand it. Like I understand it. I don't agree with it. I don't think I could do that for my children, but I understand. Like yo, you're still a young boy. It's a kid inside you that still had to grow up and become a man, and so that required a level of empathy, because now once I went through it kind of similar to what you went through, I understand how you may have made a decision that it was collateral damage. It wasn't supposed to happen. It was just collaterally it happened, and it wasn't like I purposely hurt you. I just so happened to hurt you, and I didn't mean to do it.
Yeah. I think it's powerful what you said. What just jumped out to me too is like, you said your mom got mad at you for understanding that. But I think that's the distinction between sympathy and empathy, right? She can't empathize because she's not been or has not been and could not be in that same position.
Wow.
Whereas you, as Black, male, father, same age, like all of those things aligned in your experience to mirror what your father experienced and allowed you to be able to empathize. And I think that's a huge piece. So, man,
you know what also is key about that? There's a different trauma experience there. Like Reggie experienced negligence from his father, where his mom might have experienced abuse. And I'm not saying physically abuse, but it may have been arguments, whatever. It's a whole different trauma, abandonment versus negligence, whatever. It's just different ways that it's experienced at different ages by different sexes in different contexts. Like Doug was talking about environment, all kinds of things. In closing, there was something that was on my mind last night as we prepared for this. I found myself thinking about decisions that need to be made, right? And it made me think about how often we leave church, or I don't know if everybody's a believer in Jesus or what, but when you leave church, you find yourself holding on to the positive message you heard, but then not realizing like throughout the week, you got to carry some stuff out. So as I was preparing last night, I found myself acknowledging like, I don't need to talk to this person, or I need to talk to this person. And having an idea of it in my head was key, but then realizing you got to carry it out. Because there's one thing that it connected with immediately was with my first experience with therapy. My therapist said, you can't conquer what you don't confront, you can't confront what you don't acknowledge, and you can't acknowledge what you don't see. And if you don't start with the first step, like conquering is what we all want. But if you don't get to see, right, then you don't even get to acknowledge. And seeing it is different than acknowledging. Acknowledging something is identifying it for what it is. If everybody turns on their TV right now and they see 4 Black men, those are Black people. But you acknowledge, that's Ihsan, that's Eric, that's Reggie, that's Doug. Now you identified it. Now you're able to walk towards it and confront it, and then you're able to conquer it. But a lot of things that we do, we have to realize we have to see it. And my hope is that the people who are tuning in, and even us on the panel, that we acknowledge what we've seen. We've called some things by name tonight. We've identified some things in therapy, in the circles and the places that we communicate, the spaces that have been created. Now, what are we going to do with it? And my hope is that we and the people who are out here consuming this content, that you take it and that you confront the things that are in your life, and that you conquer the things. And with the help of God, with the help of higher power, with the help of community, the resources that are here for us physically, financially, emotionally, the people who are available, that we take advantage or lean on the things that are here for us. and that we heal and that we grow. And I believe that that is possible. I believe that it is happening, and I'm seeing it in my life. I'm here for a reason. I'm alive. Eric is here for a reason. He's alive. Doug, Reggie, the founders of these organizations around the city, everybody's here for a purpose. So my hope with these community conversations and every other platform that's created is that somebody is choosing life, and that somebody is choosing forgiveness. Somebody's choosing the higher road. Somebody's choosing to not murder. Somebody's choosing to be responsible as a father. Somebody's choosing to just be the good that they want to see in the world. Reggie and Doug, is there any resources you want to share about Black Men Hill, how we can contact you, how people can follow along with the King's Corner, and any other resources you have?
Yeah, blackmenhill.org. The King's Corner link is up there. You can go to the website at Black Men Hill everywhere, on Instagram. So all the social media platforms is all Black Men Hill, and you can also find King's Corner under all of those things. The free, I think we're doing a cohort right now, so if you can get your application in to get the free therapy. We're in 8 states, so we're in your state. I think it's PA, Jersey, Delaware, the DMV, in Georgia right now. So we in your state, make sure you fill out the application all the way through, because they only get the completed application. If you do it halfway, we can't go through that. And so the cohorts are happening right now. And I just wanted to thank you guys for allowing us this space. I don't care what Eric say, Doug. He coming to do that mental health roof for gun violence. That title was fire. That's his title that he's coming to do.
I got it. Trust me, I got it.
D. Reed, you got anything to add?
Man, look, I ain't trying to put up no fight, bro. I don't want no problem. I want no problem. I'll be there.
I really feel like a coach right now and a teammate, man. I feel like just, putting the hand in, and then on 3, let's go. You know what I mean? Like, let's go. I thank you guys for this discussion, this platform, man, and continue to do the work, man. And this is what we're here for. This is what we want to get out to our communities. We want to get out to our people, man. So I appreciate you guys.
Thank you. And I want to make sure we thank your founders and everybody else as a part of the Black Men Hill team. I mentioned to Zakia when we were on a panel last year together that I want to collaborate to some extent. This is the one that we can do right now virtually, but when we have more freedom outside, I would love to partner with y'all and MBKCares, the Fathering Circle, whatever capacity we can, to make sure that we're working in collaboration. All right. Eric, are there any final thoughts you have?
No, I just want to say that, I think your question about, the state of the conversation around mental health is exemplified here in this group here. I think we are tired of being tired, right? And I think we've gotten to a point in our societies and our communities, and most importantly, the individuals, that we know that the systems that we've been operating in and the society that we're living under has not been a healthy one. And I'm just grateful that there's individuals out here like our guests and like you, Ihsan, who are working to make a difference and working to change it. So I'm just grateful to be a part and along for the ride. So thank you.
Thank you too, Eric. And thank you, Doug and Reggie. Thank you for the people who are walking in the legacy of. While you were speaking, Dr. King came to mind. And one of the things he said, like, in, I believe it was the dream speech, is how he hopes that his children can be judged not by the color of their skin, but the content of their character. I believe that the healing that's going on is defining the content of our character. And that we're walking in things that I don't even know if he knew that he was prophesying over our lives. And I think if we're seeing that now, I can't imagine if given some peace and some more healing and some more space, the direction of this world can go in a good direction, despite all the trauma and all the other things that say otherwise. So I appreciate y'all.
Mic drop.
Drop that mic, bro.
Mic drop right there.
But y'all have a peaceful night. And to not our studio audience this week, to our viewers out there, continue to follow MBKCares. You can go follow and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I encourage you all to check us out at mbkcares.com, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at MBKCares. And please tell a friend, pass on some of these resources, the links for all of our episodes of Wellness Wednesday, for the last 2.5 seasons are still available. I encourage you all to share it with your loved ones, share it with your enemies, just share it with somebody, pass it on. And I encourage you to come back next week. Next week, we're going to have a special show. Alana is actually going to be the host for next week. Alana Joyner-Stevens. She's one of the executive board members for MBKCares, and she's going to take us down a journey of personal care. And she's going to be a consistent host on here on a monthly basis. And we're looking forward to her stepping into that role. And we invite you to come back again. So we'll see you on May 12th, next Wednesday, 6 p.m. for another episode of Wellness Wednesday. Everyone have a peaceful night. And that's that.